morning, everyone. I'm Lisa Patel, and I'm the president of the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board. And I'm your host. I'm also glad you could join us for our first of many Real Women events. The time you're spending with us today will be meaningful and inspiring. But we're also getting candid by talking about real issues impacting real women in our industry. Today, we have an impressive lineup of incredible change makers who advance their leadership of women. Speaking of which, I'd like to first turn it over to Mayor of Mississauga, Bonnie Crombie, and TREB member and past president and current Toronto City Councillor, Cynthia Lai.
Hello everyone, Mayor Bonnie Crombie here from the great city of Mississauga, and I'm so excited to join you virtually to be part of the Toronto Real Estate Board's inaugural Real Women, Real Lives, Real Stories virtual event hosted by the Women in Real Estate Task Force. Mississauga is proof that women make important and positive change in society. 6 out of our 11 councillors are women, and when you include me, Mississauga City Council is 58% women, which is well over parity. And who can forget the lasting contributions made by our former mayor, Hazel McCallion. And when you add more women to politics, you get different results. You get diversity, different perspectives, more consensus, and better financial results too. And I believe the same is true across all fields and in all sectors. Women do bring a different perspective. That's because we see the world differently. The world my mother grew up in is much different the one I grew up in, which is much different from the one my daughter is growing up in. I always thought I could have it all, but just not at the same time. My daughter, she believes she can have it all right now. We're moving the needle each and every year, but it will take a generation or more before we achieve equality. The most important thing we can do as women is to encourage each other to reach higher and to achieve success. Each and every one of us has a responsibility to mentor, support, inspire, and build the character and confidence of young women to help ensure that their dreams become a reality. We have a duty to the next generation of women to give them the best shot possible. I hope that tonight is not the end of the conversation, but the start of a longer discussion about how we can set up women for success. Thank you for having me. Please stay healthy and stay safe.
Hello, my name is Cynthia Lai, one of the 10 and first racialized female president of TREB in its 100 years history, and now a Toronto City Councillor. First off, I'd like to commend President Lisa Patel on establishing the Women in Real Estate Task Force and hosting this Real Women, Real Lives, and Real Stories series. Women face different challenges than men in the business world. Real estate is no different. To be a successful woman, you need to build a network, grow self-esteem and self-confidence. Mentorship is key to provide experience and advice. It is about women supporting women. By sharing real stories, we help each other to grow and thrive. I have many stories to tell in getting to where I am today. But in a nutshell, dare to dream, believe in yourself, stay cool and calm above, and pedal like hell underneath. Be a hustler. Thank you, Lisa, for all you do to empower more women to become leaders. Enjoy the series.
Mayor Crombie and Councillor Lai, thank you for your passionate, encouraging words for our future generation of female leaders. I'd also like to give a warm welcome to TREB CEO, John D. Michel, to share a few thoughts on what TREB is doing to support social justice, diversity, and inclusion.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm very excited to be part of this conversation and to share the stage with these incredible women leaders. This event is the brainchild of President Lisa Patel and our Women in Real Estate Task Force. Today we're bringing you the unique perspectives around equity, diversity, and inclusion. At TREB, we continue to advocate for women, and we do this by listening, learning, asking, and partnering for social justice. The task forces have hit the ground running and are making great strides. I'd also like to share a few words about the members who are behind these task forces. These people are catalysts for change, and they lead the way with actionable recommendations on new ways we can foster and support a more collaborative, equal, and inclusive industry. They're committed to the cause, and this is what makes them so distinct. They are determined to strengthen equality and create positive change. But we're going one step further. We want to hear from you, TREB members, to better understand any barriers you and your clients face as they relate to gender, race, ethnicity, culture, class, and ability. We're taking on a first-of-its-kind research about equity, diversity, and inclusion in the GTA in the real estate market to explore opportunities and challenges with the help of Ryerson's Diversity Institute. With this survey, our members will be able to share their opinions and perspectives about discrimination and unfair treatment that they have seen or experienced themselves. When the results are in, TREB will create best practices and a toolkit that brokerages can use to help transform our industry. This research will help shape recommendations to the board so TREB can continue to play a leading role in advancing this important issue. We've also developed a hub for our members to discover the latest events and news and also explore a wealth of resources to help build an industry that is more inclusive and that treats everyone fairly. Together, we are cultivating meaningful change, and we look forward to conducting this groundbreaking research. And now, Lisa, back to you to start this much anticipated panel discussion.
Thank you so much, John. I'm glad you could take part in today's event and give your perspective from an association level. Next, I'd like to introduce trust strategist and body language expert, Pamela Burnham. She is a former undercover police officer and federal prosecuting attorney turned successful entrepreneur and speaker. Can I say and enough? Pamela will show us how to use nonverbal techniques to detect deception, negotiate better deals, and close more sales. Wow.
Thank you so much to the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board for inviting me to be a part of your Real Women, Real Lives, Real Stories event. It's not often that we get an opportunity to really learn valuable experiences from a variety of unique perspectives about the challenges and struggles that have made it possible to achieve incredible results. My story is different than many that you're going to hear, I'm sure. I started out as an undercover police officer, more than 20 years ago. I worked with a false identity, living for months at a time with a different name and a different background while I worked in the drug enforcement section. I was one of two women in a unit of 89 police officers, and I worked throughout Ontario, including throughout the GTA. And it was during that time that I really honed my skills on nonverbal communication, because I would have to anticipate and watch for violent or increased shifts in the body language of people around me for my own personal safety. And I carried those techniques with me when I became a federal prosecuting attorney, and later in graduate school where I studied negotiations. Since that time, I've been called upon by various media outlets to talk about trust and nonverbals and how those go together. And I've been fortunate enough to speak on a variety of stages in front of audiences from 50 to 11,000 people throughout North America and Australia. And the really cool thing about the shift that we've had now is that I've been speaking a lot on trust and nonverbals in virtual conferences like the one we're a part of today. In fact, I was very fortunate to be able to speak in the Middle East and Europe, and now in the GTA in the Greater Toronto region, all in the same week, which has been pretty interesting. And it's from all of that experience and the variety of challenges that I face, both as primarily oftentimes the only woman or one of very few women working in the different professional capacities that I had in the criminal justice system, and now speaking on nonverbal communication and trust, that I've been able to put together strategies that you can put into place immediately, actionable strategies and key takeaways that you can use to overcome some of the challenges that you're facing in your career right now. We're going to talk a lot about what we display. And of course, competence and confidence and empathy and trustworthiness are going to be a huge part of that. Then we're going to shift into decoding the messages that other people are sending to us, because it's very important that these communication skills, so important as we move through our professional careers. And then the last part of what I'm going to talk about is detecting deception. And that's always an interesting piece. And there's quite a few things I think might surprise you of all the things that you've heard about in detecting deception. So I want to share with you some of those really key strategies and techniques that you can start using immediately that'll make things a little bit easier. Now, we may have heard, or you might have already been aware, that the majority of our communication is nonverbal. In fact, the research tells us that the majority is nonverbal, but we may have heard that it's 97 or 93% and only 7% of what's being said actually matters, or it's 50-50 or 60-40. There's a lot of research that really focuses on small groups of people, and some of it is a bit dated. But one of the things, and the most important part, that all of the research agrees on, and that is that the majority of our communication that demonstrates our credibility, our confidence, our likability, and most importantly, our trustworthiness is evaluated through nonverbals. And here's what's interesting. We'll often do business with people, you may have heard the know, like, trust. We'll do business with people that maybe we don't know, and that's often the case. And sometimes we even have to do business with people we don't like all that well. But rarely will people do business with those that they do not trust. So establishing trust, especially as a professional realtor, incredibly important. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I just want to give you a little bit of background as to why we do the things we do and why all of this is so important and key to our success. And the first is that our limbic brain really evaluates what we are seeing before we even understand what's happening. So here's what I mean by that. Within 50 milliseconds, so less than a blink of an eye, we have already determined whether or not the person that we are communicating with is friend or foe. And of course, that has evolved over time because, we never knew when we were going to step out of the cave, for example, and there's going to be someone ready to hurt us or take something from us. So we really developed a keen sense to identify friend or foe immediately. And within 7 seconds, the research tells us that we have formed an opinion that we either like or dislike, that we trust or distrust, we feel at ease or we feel uneasy with that person within 7 seconds. Sometimes we're aware of it. Oftentimes it is subconscious. We're not aware of it. But here's what happens. Our brain starts looking for reasons to justify that initial opinion. So we see someone, we don't like them. Now we start looking for reasons why we don't like them, even if we don't really know that that's what we're doing. Have you ever had that sense you've met someone? There wasn't anything particular that they said or did, but you just didn't really like them. It comes from the nonverbal cues that they're sending and that you're receiving. And the interesting thing is that we need to really be able to control or start to work through some of that in how we're perceived, because if we're making those decisions and determinations about others, they're making them about us as well. But I want to just give you a little bit of caution before we get started and into all of the details. And I call that the ABCs. And it's unfortunate that oftentimes people will misinterpret body language or nonverbal signals. Happens all the time. And that's because they attach meaning to one single gesture. So we see someone cross their arms, or we see somebody move away or avert their eye contact, and we attach immediate meaning to that. So we're going to go through why that is not a good idea, why that really skews what we're seeing. Next is our bias. We all have a bias. We have our own set of experiences, and we attach a lot of meaning to those. And oftentimes, especially when people are not very self-aware, the bias is very extreme, and we're missing a lot of cues because we're picking up on too many stereotypes, or we have preconceived ideas. And that will hinder our ability to communicate and negotiate effectively, especially when it comes to nonverbal communication. And the third part is context. how we deal professionally versus how we deal with things personally is very different often. How we communicate with our children or our partners or spouses, of course, can oftentimes be very different than how we're going to communicate with a client or a broker or another realtor. So really being aware of the ABCs, very, very important. Now, I want to go through a fun exercise with you, and you can just type into the chat or you can write it down, whatever feels most comfortable for you, but I'm always interested to see how people will answer the questions. Now, there is no real cash on the line here, just some fun and some interesting things that may surprise you. You may be surprised by some of these. So I'm going to go through some slides, and you're going to see 2 photographs, and you're going to choose A or B, true or false. Really easy. We'll go through it quickly, and then we're going to take a deep dive into what this means and how we can use it for ourselves professionally to increase confidence and work through some of those challenges that we often face. All right, are you ready? Let's get started. The first one, which appears more confident? Now, I want to get you to look at both photographs in totality so you see everything that's going on there. And it may surprise you to know that it's actually A, because she is showing a very vulnerable part of her body. So, our face right down through our torso and our throat area, our important organs, a very vulnerable area. So to show that and demonstrate that, definitely confident. Covering it can show a lack of confidence or insecurity. So again, I'm going through all of these, but remember, not just one in isolation. We're going to build on everything as we go through. Okay, changing gears a little bit. We are all living in this virtual world. Virtual backgrounds make you appear untrustworthy. True or false? It's actually true. How many of you have seen those virtual backgrounds? People have, bookcases behind them or things that you can clearly tell are a virtual background. But here's the problem. We are expecting people to respect and show some vulnerability because that's what we're doing. I've invited you into my home office. You can see a part of me in the background and things it says about me. I like trees, I like plants, I like modern furniture, I like these things. So I'm inviting you in. If we're in a meeting or a negotiation, and I have invited you into my space and I don't see your background, I just see this virtual background where your hand gets cut off or part of your head is missing because you don't have the proper lighting or green screen behind you, it can be very off-putting. And I start wondering, what else are you hiding behind there? Now, I recognize that we've all been forced into inviting people into our personal spaces very, very quickly, and it's been challenging. However, the only time really I would recommend using a virtual background when it comes to your credibility and trustworthy is perhaps when you're wanting to demonstrate your company logo or something that's important to see. Otherwise, please do not use. The research all points to the fact very untrustworthy. All right, the next one, which depicts insecurity. Very interesting because, arguably you could say both gentlemen in these portion of them in the photographs will depict some confidence, but here's what we know. Grooming, we're adjusting the tie or maybe adjusting some jewelry or our hair, or we're ventilating, we're moving parts of our clothing, happens when we feel insecure, we're nervous, we're trying to really, let some of that nervous heat out, or we're pacifying ourselves by touching ourselves or rubbing, etc. That all indicates insecurity. But here's an interesting thing as well with this photograph. When you look at photograph B, you see his hands in his pockets, but you can still see his thumbs. I'd like you moving forward to pay attention anytime you see stock photos or professional photos of healthcare professionals or doctors. You'll see in their white lab coats, and you can always see their hands in and their thumbs sticking out because that subliminally communicates confidence. All right, let's get to our next one. This is very interesting. Which appears more open to your ideas? Now, again, paying close attention to every part of this photograph, it's actually B. She's the most open, even though her arms are closed, which is a myth around being closed off. I want you to pay close attention to her face. You see a more genuine smile and interest. She's looking directly. The woman A still has part of her crossed off with her hands, but she also is not showing an open and warm facial expressions, a little bit more closed off. So we're going to pay a lot more attention to that area. Okay, this one is really important when we start meeting again, because when we're negotiating, we want honest discussions. And which seating arrangement do you think inspires more honest discussions? For those of you who chose B, that is correct. And that is because we have seen that through research, the round tables, the smaller round tables, encourage intimacy, which is probably why they have them at romantic restaurants when we're able to go to romantic restaurants. The larger, more conference type table creates a distance. The other thing that's interesting in this photo is the comfortable seating. Really inspires more honest discussions when people feel comfortable. There's a whole body of research around size of rooms, etc. So when you are negotiating in person, there's a lot to take into account as to how you set up the room. All right, our last question. This one always gets people. People are most likely to lie when they're A, texting, or B, on the phone. I'm going to be straight up with you here. It's a bit of a trick question. And that's because people are more apt to lie when they're texting. However, those lies are usually low stakes and more social in nature. So for example, I'm finishing my favorite movie at home, but I'm supposed to be at a friend's for dinner, and I text to say I'm running late because I'm stuck in traffic. I don't honestly say that I'm somewhere else. And that's a social white lie, and people tell them often, people lie about those types of things, and doing it on text is low stakes, and we have short answers, sometimes emojis, etc. Lying on the phone is less often. However, higher stakes and more on the line when we are lying on the telephone. So it doesn't happen as often, but when we do lie on the phone, it's often because it's a more important thing. We don't expect to be recorded on the phone. So people are more often likely to lie in that regard. All right, I mentioned at the beginning that I've split this into 3 parts for you, because we're talking about increasing our real confidence and abilities and trustworthiness around negotiations and what that looks like. And the first part is to display. And those are the nonverbal cues that we are putting out there to the world. That's really the only thing we can control is what we do. The second is to decode. And that are the nonverbal cues that we receive and how to interpret those. And the third is detection, and those are the deception cues. And again, likely some surprises there for you. So let's dive right in to the first part, which is to display. It's important to us to really display competence. So how our abilities, our knowledge, and our communication skills, when we put those things together, so just to reiterate, competence plus knowledge plus communication skills equals confidence, that self-confidence that we can display. And when we have empathy with confidence together, that's really where we get down to trust. And my research points that those are the 2 biggest things that we can display to encourage and embrace and really build trust with others. Now, posture isn't just something that our mom and our chiropractors tell us about. Everyone is subconsciously evaluating your posture. It really displays a lot about you. If you've had the opportunity to watch Amy Cuddy's TED Talk on the power pose, and that is really what we're looking at with the woman in the superhero cape there, with her hands on her hips, her arms, what we call akimbo, so her thumbs are behind her, her fingers are in front. That is the power pose. And Amy Cuddy did some interesting research around that and found that we can actually change how we feel inside with our nonverbals, our body language. And if you're interested in that talk, I highly encourage that you watch it. Her research has been criticized. Imagine some male colleagues that she worked with were she was getting a lot of attention. She had one of the top 5 watched TED Talks of all time. She was on television shows. She was getting a lot of media around this. So there was a ton of criticism that came directed at her. So she redid her research. And what she found is that the stress hormone cortisol starts to lower in the power pose, and the confidence hormone testosterone starts to increase. And she redid the research and she found that this power pose really accomplished that. And that says a lot about us. We can command a lot of physical space. Now, I don't expect you to walk into negotiations with your hands on your hips. That can be a little off-putting, but it's something you can do before to send that confidence message to your brain. And that'll help you have a purposeful stride, which indicates a lot about confidence and power. And of course, commanding that physical space. So when we take up that space, it says, we are confident, we are ready to negotiate, and we know our stuff. All right. The next thing that I mentioned is that empathy and confidence together equal trust. And there are a few ways that we can display that, because displaying confidence without any empathy can be interpreted as arrogance or off-putting. And to just only display empathy can, again, cause people to feel that we are less than competent. And there's a lot of research around women in particular that are rarely seen as competent and likable. They're seen as one or the other, where men, for the most part, and the research shows that they are seen as both, and that the two don't impact one another. So I want to give you some strategies and techniques that you can put into play to demonstrate what confidence and empathy look like together. And that all comes from our presence, where we start. And our posture is a part of that, our energy, the energy that we bring into the room. We can all think of times where we've been around people and their energy just seems to be infectious. They seem confident, but they also seem warm and engaging. And that happens with a genuine smile. So eye contact, those are things that are very, very important, and they are part of our presence. So having that smile, that genuine smile, it seems trite or maybe obvious, but it is so important. A smile is seen really the same as open posture. It's inviting and engaging. And the research tells us that a neutral smile, so one that's not over the top, but a neutral smile, an engaging smile, equals trust. And people can actually sense when you're smiling if you're on a phone call. So I would encourage that next time you have an important phone call negotiation, try smiling. Even if maybe you don't feel like it right in that moment, just try and see how it changes. Or you can experiment with colleagues and try it with one another and see if you can pick up when someone is smiling, and just start paying attention to those cues. They really, really make a big difference. Now we want to have that genuine smile. So our cheeks lift up, our eyes crinkle a little bit, the corners of our mouth turn. And it's very difficult to do for people who have had too many enhancements, let's just say. And I'm not trying to be trite with all the needles and everything, but they can actually, and the research tells us this, destroy trust a little bit when people cannot have full engagement in their face and their smile. So we want to keep a few of those lines available for everybody, because they can really relay a genuine smile. And of course, the open posture is perceived, people are perceived as being more friendly and open. And actually, when I was working as a federal prosecuting attorney, jurors prefer open gestures. They're watching for where your hands are. They want to see that you're giving all of the information. So that's an important thing when you're in a negotiation strategy. You want to be seen as open. You're laying it all out there for everyone. You're not closing anything down. You want to put it out, and that will be seen as more engaging and trustworthy. As well, having that mirroring. Mirroring is something, sometimes we think about it kind of creepy Simon Says sort of thing, but what I'm talking about is very, very subtle. And when we subtly mirror someone's body language, so they move their hand, we can move part of our hand, legs crossing, uncrossing, etc. So very, very subtle. It telegraphs, I'm like you. And when people are comfortable with you, you can sense that. Have you ever had that vibe where you feel really comfortable? Things are going well. So I would encourage you to try this technique. It works. You're in an important negotiation. You're having some conversation. It seems to be going well. For the first 2 to 5 minutes, you are very subtly and casually mirroring their body language. Now, when you get that sense that things are going well, I want you to shift your body language. So maybe uncross your arms, uncross your legs, reposition yourself, move something, and do that for 20 to 30 seconds and watch if the other person does the same. They start mirroring you. If and when that happens, that is a key indicator that you've established rapport and are on your way to a very trusting relationship. They are trusting you. It's a great time. If you have something a little bit more contentious or challenging in the negotiations, watch for those cues. That is a good time to engage and bring that forward. So try it. I would love to hear how that works, because everyone that I put that challenge out to reports back to me that it works perfectly and they really like that technique. The next one may seem, again, something that we're always looking for. I just want to put the proviso out there that this is about, I'm going to be sharing this strategy with you, and it's primarily geared toward Western culture. So Western Europe, throughout North America. It's really something that, again, going back to our bias and how we see things in the context of things, for those people in Canada, and particularly in the GTA and through the Greater Toronto region, we see people from all over the world relocating to this incredible part of the world for living and working. So we're getting used to and working with a lot of different cultures and diversity, which is phenomenal. But remember, not every strategy translates to every culture, and this is one of them. And it's all around eye contact. Now, again, I'm communicating this for Western cultures. When we make eye contact 60 to 70%, it communicates and builds rapport. Too much eye contact can be seen as a bit creepy or off-putting, and too little can be seen as unfriendly or disinterested. So we want to keep it to around 60 to 70%. The technique that you can try is when you are out, of course, now that we have masks, et cetera, we're paying a lot more attention to people's eye movement, but just paying attention to people's eye color can get you making eye contact with people. But I can't emphasize enough, you want to be aware of the cultures and the differences that you're dealing with, so that you aren't doing something that is seen as offensive or too aggressive in another culture. All right, we want to get into our second part of this, and that is decoding what the cues, the nonverbal cues that are coming to us. It's essentially, we're looking at emotions. We're not reading people's minds. We are looking at emotions. And the important part around that is really being able to pick up on shifts that happen. We've all heard of active listening, but I want to encourage you that active observing is even more important, because oftentimes people can rehearse perfectly what to say. And I know this from working as a police officer, and again, as a prosecuting attorney, people will tell me lots of things that aren't true. I'm always watching for that alignment. I'm decoding what their words are, if they are aligned or match what their nonverbals, their body language is communicating to me. When it's out of alignment, I know I'm onto something and things are not quite right. When it is in alignment, it works. So for example, I'm having a conversation with someone about a property and they tell me, no, there's never been a grow op in the basement. And their head is nodding yes, but it's usually not as obvious as I've just made it. It could just be a quick nod. It could be that they've answered something in the affirmative, but they shake their head very quickly no. They shrug their shoulders as though they don't know when they're telling you something is straight up fact. So these are subtle things that are important to watch for in active observation, which is the most important part of our communication skills. We're going to decode the most information from that. Now, of course, this is more of an in-person strategy, so I want to share these with you because, of course, in-person meetings, very, very important. Proximity, so how close we are to someone. If they lean in when we're having a conversation with them, demonstrate some engagement. Leaning further away, maybe disengaged, or we've said something a bit off-putting, paying attention to where they are in relation to us. Of course, we have social distancing to contend with right now, but when we are back, we're going to pay a lot more attention to that proximity and the barriers. So if I'm having a conversation with you and we're doing that mirroring technique that I talked about, all of a sudden I present something maybe around pricing or a defect or some other contentious issue, and you place the other person we're negotiating with places the coffee cup between us, their pen, they move the papers, anything that creates that barrier, it's a perceived barrier, is telling us that we have maybe shifted things a bit. We've broken a bit of rapport, we're going to need to work harder to get back at that. So watching to decode for those things really important. And again, we're losing a lot of information, aren't we, with the face masks. We're missing out on that really important part of the face, which is from the nose down, that tells us so much. But again, the eyes can tell us a lot, as can the rest of the body. So starting with the top of the head, how the head moves, we talked about, nodding yes or shaking no, even how the speed. So when they're shaking their head quickly, fast, that can tell us that, okay, they're ready for us to hurry up, or they are slowly nodding and moving their hands like they're ready to receive more. So they want more information. These are matters of interpretation, but really important to watch for. The torso, here's an interesting tip for you. If you are dealing with two clients, the body language of the person who is in control is usually pretty static, pretty stable. The person who is looking to the decision maker will point their torso toward the decision maker. Of course, the limbs tell us a lot, as do the feet, where the feet are pointed where they want to go. Now, the most interesting part, and the part I get asked about often, is detection. Now, I want to put this out there that it's not about truth or innocence. It's about recognizing moments that warrant further exploration. So how valuable would it be to you to know when you're being deceived, either by clients, perhaps even another agent, unfortunately, brokers, vendors, or even in your personal life? I think it's very important. It was one of the key things that I looked for. I just want all of you to know that there is no such thing as a human lie detector, but you can get better than the 50-50 odds that most people currently have by practicing these skills and increasing your ability to spot clues from the changes that happen in emotion, from the stimulus that is presented. And by stimulus, I mean you're presenting a piece of evidence, you're presenting the contract, you're presenting photographs, or you're asking a question. That is the stimulus. And when you've done that, you're going to be paying really close attention to those cues that happen immediately. So within 5 seconds of that stimulus being presented, you're going to ask the question or present the document or photograph, and then you're going to pause and you're going to observe and allow as much silence as possible, especially that first 5 seconds, very telling, because we go into a fight, flight, or freeze situation. So that freeze, they don't say anything because they're trying to think about what to say. That's a good clue that we're onto something with deception. The flight is they start fidgeting, moving, trying to get away. Their feet are pointed toward the exit. They're moving their anchor points, which are those parts of their body that are touching a surface, either a table, the chair. They start moving those. They start going through those pacifiers that I talked about, or the ventilators, another clue to look for. And of course, the fight is to become a little bit argumentative or start asking more questions or to go on the defensive. These are all things, none in isolation. Remember, we can't just look to things in isolation. We need clusters. We need 2 or more. Now, there are several more deceptive cues that I could go through. I just wanted to give you a few easy ones to remember. And remember, disregard global behaviors that happen in isolation. So that one arm being crossed or the one little fidget. Instead, pay attention to that movement that's happening immediately following the stimulus, whatever that stimulus is, and then focus on those behaviors and rely on the timing. The longer it takes, the more of a clue that will be for you for deception. And there are a lot of warning things. Remember, you're looking for deviations from how they normally act to how they're now acting after that stimulus. And you have a lot to do with that. So how we display the things that we're doing, and that includes the static display. So how we have our room set up. Remember, we talked about furnishings, and there's a lot of research around the size of the room when we're negotiating with someone, and where to set the chairs and where to do all of these things, all very important. That's the static information. So we want to be aware of what that is. We also want to look at what the dynamic is, and that's the body language, the nonverbals that we are displaying. And then we're going to decode what we're getting back, and we're going to watch for those deception cues that are really important. And with that, I want to just say thank you so much to Treb and to all of you for taking time with me today to go through what I call 3D negotiation techniques, which is display, decode, detect. I hope that you can use and implement some of these into your everyday negotiation strategies as professional realtors. And I wish you the best. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me.
What a great presentation. Thank you, Pamela, for those real-world examples of interpreting body language and how to establish trust. Now, I'd like to invite my co-host, Jennifer Evelyn, to join me. Jennifer is also the co-chair of TREB's Women in Real Estate Task Force.
Thank you for the introduction, Lisa, and hello, everyone. It's time to begin our Power Talk with our panelists. We have a great lineup today of realtors and entrepreneurs with fantastic stories of how they've overcome struggles and challenges to get where they are today. We'll start off with the introductions. Ellie Davis is a fellow TREB member. Ellie, tell us a little about yourself.
I have been in real estate since June of 1983, and I started out doing open houses all that hot summer long, and I became quite successful very quickly. So nothing motivates you more than a little bit of success. And I started out knowing very little, no training. I had a telephone with a hold button. I had no technology, a dial telephone actually, and no technology whatsoever, and a good memory, and a very burning desire to be successful, because I didn't want to go back to my former career of being a school teacher. So that's the short story. And 37 years later, I am still here.
That's fantastic.
I'd love to hear the long story one day.
Right? Next up, we have Camille Dundas. Camille is the co-founder of BuyBlacks.com and a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant. Share with us why you started your company, Camille.
Oh, well, my husband and I co-founded BuyBlacks.com 8 years ago, and I was working in mainstream media at the time. My husband had his own marketing company, and together we noticed there was a gap in terms of how mainstream media covers the Black Canadian community. And so we wanted to create a space where we could focus on positive stories from the Black Canadian community. And it's been 8 years. We're now the #1 Black online magazine. We've won 3 National Ethnic Press Awards, a commendation from the Prime Minister. And we pride ourselves on doing amazing features and profiles on Black entrepreneurs, Black business owners, artists, all walks of life who are doing amazing things with their life, but who wouldn't necessarily get mainstream media coverage.
Jen, she deserves one of these. I know you have one too.
Absolutely.
Those are great.
And last but definitely not least, Michelle Goodridge. Michelle is also a TREB member and founder of REAL. Michelle, can you tell us why you're here today and a little snippet about REAL?
I'm actually not a TREB member, but I would love to be. I don't sell real estate. So I work at the corporate head office for Remax Integra and Remax Europe. And I've been with the company for 23 years. I've never sold any real estate, but I love real estate. We're on the franchise side of the business, but I do love real estate. I actually did take the first two phases for the real estate course a long time ago, over a decade ago. But you know, I love the business. I love our agents. I love our network. And what I did was I created REAL, which stands for Remax Empowering Ambitious Ladies. And we started that mostly for our network in Europe, because the ratio between men and women in Europe is quite low. They're still very patriarchal over there. So we wanted to encourage and show that a career in real estate is a great alternative or a great option for women. And that was the main reason we started it. We wanted to give the women the confidence to go out on their own and start their own businesses so that they could better their own lives, their families' lives, and the lives of the community, because I know that women are big, big cheerleaders for all of that. So what happened was Remax LLC, based out of Denver, loved the concept, and their global development department wanted to introduce it to our group outside of North America. And so we opened it up to everybody, and so far so good. We're expanding, and we have a Facebook group page, and we do Zoom calls every month now, and they've just been fantastic. The responses, actually, I'm overwhelmed by the response. I'm not surprised by the response, but I'm a little overwhelmed by the response. So I think I'm on the right path with this particular group. So thank you very much for having me here today. This is really excellent.
Let's give them all a shout out. Absolutely for joining us. All amazing. So many wonderful stories that I know that we're going to dive deep into. So let's get started with those conversations. Beginning with Ellie. How do we get more women in leadership roles?
I think we get caught up in our everyday life. So we sort of tend to run away with that. And I've never really been a huge leader. I've just sort of just taken care of a lot of my own business. I did have a larger team. I minimized it because I realized I wasn't the greatest leader, but I was a very good salesperson. So now I just have a very small team, and I'm still very hands-on. But to get people into leadership, I think they have to have that in them if they want to do it. And some people are great at it, and some people just don't have the desire.
I agree with you. I feel like you either are born with it or you're not, and you develop even more strength as you go through your journey of life. So well said. And now on to Michelle. Are you ready, Michelle? I got a doozy. I'm teasing. How can women bring their voices to key decision-making tables in the real estate industry?
Well, I think that, as more and more women are getting seats at the table, which is about time, I think that we need to stop kind of standing against the wall and standing back and really, really encouraging the decisions that really will affect us. I think that women tend to lack the confidence to speak up, and they can feel a little intimidated, but I believe that if you're at the table, that you are very capable and you wouldn't be there otherwise. And I think that what you have to say is important because you wouldn't be there, and I think that it's hard for women to gain that confidence, but I think it just starts with one person or just taking that risk. Like, what are they going to do? Throw you out? Do you know what I mean? Like, what are they going to do? Throw you out? You're there. Speak up. So I think that we think too much about how we're going to proceed, and we don't come across as strong in our message. And that's just something that over time we're going to have to learn. But I think that as women come together, we can encourage and develop that confidence. I think you do need that tribe. When you're with a group of men, you don't.
Our tribe here.
Exactly. When you're with a group of men, you don't necessarily get that same feeling. But when you're in a group with women, or if there even is one other woman in the room, I think you can band together and really, really promote each other and encourage and support each other.
You know what, you brought up a really good point, and I'm going to add to that. And I think one part that you mentioned about, even when we think about board tables, the chair could play a key role by, calling out names. So people do begin to open up themselves and speak out. So just a food for thought, but I'm going to pass it over to Jennifer.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm going to head right into Camille. What responsibilities do you think workplaces have to incorporate diversity and inclusion?
I think that it's so interesting because the first two questions that you asked, are so interesting because they focus on what women can do. And it's important for us to, of course, know what we can do, but this question is really important because we have to admit that sometimes no matter how much we do, there's a structural bias that's facing women. No matter how much we speak up, no matter how big our support group is, there is still this wall that we face in the workplace or even as entrepreneurs. And so I think when we're talking about women's advancement, we need to shift the conversation to the decision makers. And unfortunately, still right now, many of those decision makers are still men. And so it's not that women aren't confident. It's not that we don't want to be leaders. It's not that we don't have the capability, but it's that even when we check all those boxes, we do all the right things. Now we're called the B word. Now she has sharp elbows. Oh, watch out for her. No. So, there is a responsibility now. We can't put the onus on women to dismantle a structure that we didn't create.
And Camille, we were giggling in the back because when you said that, we recognize moments in our own lives where that
Absolutely.
has happened. But we totally understand.
So many times. And it actually leads me right into our next question, which is how does an organization benefit from including those diverse leaders in the decision-making roles and those positions of power? It's something that you've already touched on. If you could expand on that for us.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer. And I also I've often heard of people talking about the business case for diversity. And I am strongly opposed to this idea of a business case for diversity, because what you're asking the woman or a person of color to do is to justify their humanity, justify their right to exist as they are in a workplace. I don't have to explain to anybody why my voice is valued. I just have to show up. And when I start speaking, you will understand my value.
I love that. And
understand my value, right? I don't need to make a presentation, a business case to show you why you need to hire more me's.
And that's also the challenge with the world, right? Like if we think about why has diversity come back up 20 years later, because 20 years ago, the government turned around and said, okay, or organizations, companies, you make sure that you have minorities in your workforce. That wasn't the answer. And that's why we are here today and saying, you know what, this needs to change. And you are not addressing the root of the system. And that's where these conversations are so important. So thank you for sharing that. And that brings us to our next point. We are all connected as women, and all aspects of our identity and intersect. Ethnicity, gender, sexuality, ability, class, education, experience, all help to mold our unique perspectives. Michelle, what kinds of challenges and barriers have you had to face in your career?
I think maybe some of it is my fault. I think some of the challenges or barriers that I've faced, and this would be more specifically for my tenure at RE/MAX, is I started out as the executive assistant to the founders, the chairman and president, and I'm still there. And a lot of people would say, why are you still in that role? But the position, I think sometimes we put too much onus on a title and not necessarily on the work that's being done. So just because someone has a CEO title, sure, they're the CEO, but are they really doing much? That's what I'm sorry, I've been around for 23 years and I just shake my head sometimes. So
I think Ellie's shaking her head too at the same time.
I was in the staff room when I was a teacher, and the principal was saying something, and I said to myself, I could do his job. I don't know what I'm sitting here for. And I left the next year.
Exactly. So it's not.
He was no brilliant person, and he was making probably double what I was making. the time?
So I think to myself, yes, I stayed in this role, and I think, some of my challenge was being promoted into a leadership role. So I just basically, what I did with that is I just turned it around and created my own leadership role.
Mhm.
Like, nobody told me what to do, really.
Me either.
I just did it. I just took it upon myself, and it didn't matter about the title, because for me, it was what was inside of me, and it made me feel good that I was helping others and they were reacting to that. So it doesn't matter about the title. And just to Ellie's response about being a leader and not really having the desire to be a leader, sometimes it's not stated that you're a leader. It's what you do. It's how you operate. It's how you make people feel. That's being a leader. Just because you have a title doesn't necessarily make you a leader or make you a good leader.
100%.
So
We're with you on that page. And you know what? I always say it's the moment that you take yourself out of that role and realize that you're here for the greater good. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's that for me. So it's not really, I haven't really experienced a lot of challenges, but I've taken what I've had and made it bigger than what people think it is, right? If they're just looking at the title. And honestly, I really appreciate the freedoms that I've had in order to do that, because there's not a lot of places that I would just be able to say, hey, well, yeah, I'm this person, this is my title, but I'm going to take on other things, whether it's been given to me or asked of me. I want to take it on because it's something that I enjoy and that makes it better for me, serves me better. So that's not really an answer to your question, but I really haven't.
I think you should have been a real estate agent.
Probably. I don't know. You know what? I don't know how you guys deal with your clients sometimes.
I don't either.
I'm just like, I love to help people, but there's a limit. There is a limit. So anyways, that's my take on it. I've been able to take the challenges that would technically be challenges and just move them over to be opportunities more than anything.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And Ellie, I know you've got so much to share. So how do you handle difficult conversations with ease?
Well, I have to talk to myself. If it's a very difficult one, I have to talk to myself before I start. I'm very organized, as many former school teachers are. And I just prepare. I would say just plan, prepare. And every night I make a list. I still make a list of the top 3 to 5 things I have to do in the morning. And I write everything down. And it's sort of simple in a way, but you just have to be very honest. And when I'm really honest with people, I get many surprise answers that when you think people are going to be very combative, they're not. They appreciate you saying what you're saying. And I've actually said to a couple of clients, I don't think we're a good fit. And they've said, why not? I think we're a great fit. I said, well, then you have to start listening to me. And this is what we're going to do.
I think it sounds like you went back to like the school children phase
well,
instead, right? Like,
there's a lot of controlling people out there in the world, and I'm not fans of controlling people. So if you hire me to do something, then you should listen to me. If you go to the doctor, he gives you a prescription. You don't tell him what to write or her what prescription. So I say, please listen to me. If you don't want to listen to me, then there's no reason for you to hire me. And you have to state your case. You have to state the way it is.
I appreciate that. And I think, Jen, you could relate to it. I saw you giggling a couple of times there.
Once or twice.
And I think that's also like even the parent in you, right? Sits there going, you think of the school teacher, you also think about the parent in you, to anyone that has children, right? Like all of those moments where you're still going through those conversations.
Yes, I'm the mom, I'm the realtor. This is how it is. So yeah, definitely relate a little bit there.
And we're also gonna, well, so we thank you guys for those conversations, but you've got a big one to touch on now.
I do. And it's always the elephant in the room. And we're hoping to do what everybody does and take little bites out of that elephant all the time. And Camille, I'd love to get your views on this. Pay equity. How do we close the gender wage gap?
So I work a lot in the tech industry, and we can learn a lot from big tech companies who have, in some cases, single-handedly closed their gender pay gap within months. And it's proof that it absolutely can be done. So again, this is such a no-brainer to me, because if you're a manager and your woman employee comes to you and says, hey, I was talking to so-and-so and I realized that we're not being paid the same for the same job, your response should never be to backpedal or to say, okay, well, it's really complicated. Your response should just be to go and make it right. And that really starts with pay transparency. So there are a lot of companies now, women-led companies, no surprise, that are leading their companies with pay transparency. And that means not only do they attach the salaries to their job postings, but they internally post everyone's salary internally. So everyone knows what everybody else makes. And that's like revolutionary. That's unheard of. We never do that. And it's really also about changing the culture of the conversation around money. We have this culture in North America of not talking about money, it being taboo. And so women are hit way harder by that, because we are then socialized to have this good girl mentality, to be very grateful to be here. And thank you so much. And I, for example, I never negotiated my salary until like a few years ago into my career. I would say like in the last 5 years, which is insane to me, because it actually just never occurred to me that I was supposed to not take the first offer. But men are taught to negotiate and to not take the first offer. And so they are validated in a way that we aren't. And then we find ourselves years and years behind men.
Wow.
And then we also need to look at the fact that women who become mothers take a huge financial hit when we leave the workplace. And studies show that up to 40-something% of women who become mothers leave their jobs and never return. That is a huge problem. And so if we're not looking at the way that the structures of our workplace do not serve women, we will never close this gap.
That's so much food for thought. Like, and we're all like shaking our heads. We're like, wow, you're right.
This is just, I mean, you're hitting every single point. And again, you're just kind of leading us right into the next part of the conversation where, how do we work toward changing these systems that have been implemented through time that have excluded women from these leadership roles?
Yeah, so organizations need to be really intentional about this. We can't just be skirting about this issue anymore. Like walking around it, being like, yes, we're committed, we're looking at it. No, you need to either create like a dedicated team within your people team that is focused either on the pay gap, that is focused on equity hiring. And we're not just talking about gender, we're also talking about race, looking at all of these intersectionalities. You have to have some type of accountability. I know that HR people love to say that diversity is everyone's job, and I 100% agree with that. It is, but there has to be some accountability. Because if we continue with this vague approach, oh, it's everyone's job, then who's responsible? Who do we hold accountable for this? So there has to be some structure in place where you have a team that is responsible for closing this gap.
I love it. You're either in or you're out.
Yes.
Done.
Beautiful.
Yes. Yeah. Ellie, I know you're sitting back waiting for me. Here we go.
Well, pay equity isn't really on my, it's never been an issue because I'm paid when I do something. Otherwise, I don't get a paycheck.
That's the good thing about real estate,
So
right?
there's no paycheck. So I can't answer that question.
Don't worry. So I've got a better question.
Oh, you got a better, oh,
I do, yeah. Okay, are we ready? All right, so this is actually one of my favorites just because I've been mentoring for 15 years. So how can women find the right mentors and mentors who lift them up?
How can they find the right mentors? You know, some people come to me, and I mean, people come to me all the time and they ask me questions, and I'm always answering questions for them. I don't think I've actually ever mentored anyone, you know, personally.
But you just gave me advice last night. I'm just kidding.
Pseudo
I give
mentoring.
advice all the time, but I don't consider it mentoring, but maybe it is. I just never use that word. I'm very helpful. I have people knock on my door almost all the time and ask me questions. And I say, you know, I'm not the manager. I'm just another agent here. And they say, yeah, but you know more. So I guess I'm a mentor, but I didn't even think of myself as that, as, you know, as one.
So we're just going to put a recorder on you, and you're just going to save all your conversations. So whenever they knock on your door, you just pass them a recording. You say, I'll just send you this link, and you can tune in.
Yeah. Yeah. I just, you know, I answer honestly what I would do in your situation. I'd help them out. I've had agents come to me and say, would you come and help me on a listing? I'm pretty new at this, and let's, you know, do it. And they sit there. I say, okay, don't talk too much, just listen. That's the biggest thing agents do wrong, is they talk too much. So I say, just keep your mouth shut and just listen.
That's the teacher in you.
You know, and in the old days, you know, before we emailed offers, agents would come to the table with their offers, and they would actually talk themselves right out of a deal. I'd be sitting there and saying, oh my goodness, stop talking. You know, you're telling them how bad their house is, yet you want to sell it. So I do have a lot of good ideas, and I've learned so much, and I've threatened to write a book. I've never done it yet. But I still might. I really love reading Sheryl Sandberg from Facebook. You know, her book, Lean In, I think is very good. And there's a new one that she was talking about the other day with Adam Grant. I want to get that book. I'm always reading. I love motivational books. I have a great library of them. And sometimes I just read them again, because even at my stage, you know, sometimes you have a down day and you just, you know, you need a little pick me up. So.
Right. So absolutely. So I'm going to add to that list then. Good music helps lift us, as well as good books. And people, you know, great conversations, people like all of us today, and everybody tuning in, you know, those are all add that whole fulfillment and take us to another level, that lift us. And in that, hopefully we find more women that are going to help, you know, steer that ship and want to go into
a practical note to that one, Lisa.
Yeah, of course.
That for women who are looking for mentors, my advice is to be very specific when you approach that person. So I get a lot of DMs, and I get asked a lot of questions by young women, and I love mentoring both in formal programs and informally. But I'm a public person, so I get interviewed a lot in the media, and so I'll get asked questions a lot. They'll send me like 10 questions to answer. And I'll be like, if you Googled me, you would have gotten all the answers to these questions. So when you're looking for a mentor or someone who's very busy or who has a lot going on, research them as much as you can and ask them something they haven't been asked before, and ask them how you want them to help you in a very specific way. So if you just want to know about, well, how do I get into the media business? I've spoken a lot about that, so you can find that. But if you want there's a specific role that you'd like me to refer you to, or you want a contact person in a specific company that you want to apply to, then I can do that in 5 minutes. And then that is worth more to you than sitting on a Zoom call with me for an hour talking about my life.
Right. And I'm just going to add to that too, is there's a lot of really good organizations. Like I've been part of what was formerly known as CYBF, Futurepreneur, and working with young entrepreneurs for 15 years. And then I've shifted over to now doing mentoring with the universities. So there's a lot of great organizations if anybody is looking to become a mentor or, you know, entertain that more, which really takes us down the lines of, you know, this goes back to you, Michelle, now, is what can we do as leaders to provide organizational and personal support?
I think that, you know, a lot of businesses try to create like groups of people. So, for instance, we tried to incorporate sort of like a, for lack of a better word, like a party planning group, where we would encourage people to meet up after hours, and people that were like-minded would do things that they enjoyed doing, hobbies, bowling, things like that. And, you know, it can be done. I think that sometimes when a company is creating something like that, it almost feels forced. I think that, you know, I'm just using ours as an example. We've tried to really encourage more interactions between the departments, but it always seems to go back to the same people. Like you always stick in the same place. So
Sounds familiar.
yeah, you know, I think that you just have to have, I don't think it can be forced. It's along the lines of, you know, Camille was talking about diversity and inclusion and things like that, and case models. And I think that when a company is implementing something like that, and it almost feels like it's there, you have to make it seem like it's the staff's idea as opposed to the company's idea. Because when it's the company's idea, you almost feel obligated, and the results aren't the same. So I don't know that there's any specific thing that a company can do across the board, but I think that they have to be on board with anything that's coming up. They can't deter people or say, oh, that's a cool idea, and not really be that interested. I think you have to have the backing of a company, but you don't necessarily want it to be their idea.
Right.
You gotta go around about it a little bit of a roundabout way, so it makes it seem like it's somebody else's idea. It's not coming from the top. It's kind of like
you know what? And on that note, when you say that, I go back and think about, well, I think about my year of presidency, right? And and I think about our Women in Real Estate Task Force and staff. So I got to do this. So to the task force, to all of you, to anyone tuning in, and to, of course, the incredible TREB staff that are behind the scenes, working night and day on, you know, building something like this. So thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Like you're heading it up, but you've got your tribe that's really pushing it forward. And that's another thing. You've got to have that commitment. If you don't have that commitment, it just kind of fizzles out, right? So you've got to have that buy-in, and you do have to have it from the top, obviously. But sometimes when it just comes from the top, it's not taken as seriously.
It's that empowering from below. And allowing people to use those voices and nurture them and help them find their way. You know, from a personal perspective, Michelle, I've watched you in 10 years change your role dramatically to where you are now. And it's been inspiring for me, and allowed me to help find my voice again too. So, and Lisa, and you know, I can't say how grateful I am for the opportunities that I've had.
Get me all teary.
Sorry. But it's also, you know, having this army behind us. Yes, this came from the top, but we've all been empowered to use our voices now in a very positive way. So.
But it's been interesting. People, you know, when we've been on our calls, and especially during the pandemic, people were like, oh my gosh, just being on these calls has just been a lifesaver. It's been so great to be sharing with other people that are going through the same things. And for me, it's gotten me through the pandemic to know that there's all these people here that are really getting value from what we're doing. And that's at the end of the day, that's what everybody wants, right? They want to know that they've got a purpose, and they want to know that what they're doing is helping others. You know, like take the money and the status and the titles away. You feel good when you're helping people. I know I do. You know, it's just human nature, right? So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. And getting back to you, Camille, you know, yeah, I feel like you're constantly touching everything that I want to talk about and have been experiencing as well. But really, like, what responsibility do we each have in paving the way for those who follow us?
Yes.
That is a mood. That's a feeling.
It's a huge and very important responsibility. We have a saying in the Black community called "Each one, teach one." And the reason I paused before I answered that question is because it's so personal to me. Because when you ask that question, my life kind of flashes before me, you know? And what I think about most is the number of women who showed up for me when I needed someone. When I got laid off from my first job in Ottawa, it was my dream job at the CBC, and suddenly it was over. And I came to Toronto to start over, and I started over as an intern, an unpaid intern. And it was women like Vanilla Bruce, like Tracy Moore, who's now the host of City Line, who, after I met them and they saw what I could do, I literally never applied for a job again after I met them. Wow. All the jobs I got after that were through women like them who put in words for me. And so that is why I rarely ever ignore a message that I get on LinkedIn, on Instagram from another woman, especially another Black woman, because I know, number one, how hard it is to reach out to somebody, because you are already battling feelings of belonging. You're already battling feelings of worthiness. And so there's no way, even if I don't know you from anywhere, I will make time for you because people made time for me. And I know how much of a difference that made in my life. And so as women, we have to be there for each other. We have to have, I always encourage women to have a quid pro quo relationship with somebody on your team. And when I say that, I mean that, you know, between the two of you, then when you do something great, they are the one that's cheering you on publicly. They are the one that's talking about you, as opposed to you always, you know, cheering on yourself, which is fine. But it's great to have people who are
I'm rooting for all of you, everyone.
Right? And vice versa. When you do something great, if you're in a corporate environment, they're the ones who sends an email to your boss and says, wow, I really enjoyed working with Lisa on this project. She's amazing. You know what? She would be really great on this. And then you do the same for them. So we have to stick together. It's
amazing.
I love it. It's sisterhood all the way. Right?
Yeah, that's great.
I've had many people call me over the years just to say, can I talk to you? I'm thinking of going into real estate, or can I just talk to you? I'm just starting out. And then 10, 12, 15 years later, someone comes up to me and they say, you wouldn't remember this, but you encouraged me. I said, oh, really? Great. You know, or sometimes I do remember talking to them. So I guess I was a mentor in a lot of ways. I didn't think of myself as one, but I think I was actually. Now that I'm listening to all this.
Gig. Yeah, that's what that really means.
Gig.
But as we, sorry, go ahead, Camille.
Yeah. We give each other also as women is truth. And when I remember a huge truth moment that an older woman gave to me when she was hiring me to do something at her company, and she pulled me aside and said, you're not charging enough.
Wow.
And no one in my life had pulled me aside and told me that. And that was a career changing moment for me when she pushed me to know my worth.
That's incredible. That's so important. And I think that's the part that also goes back to your earlier conversation about taboo, you know, money taboo, self-worth, right? Like we it's in our system, but we don't really talk about these things. And it's over time where, you know, we've gone through that generational period where everything was taboo. And now we're into a period of, you know what, no, we need to open up. We need to speak up. We need to do these things, which takes us to wrapping up things. And let's close off by talking about how we can empower women to thrive in a transforming industry, not only today, but for future generations of female leaders. And to start off, Jennifer, didn't expect that, sorry. I am going to hand it over to you for your final thoughts.
You know, Ellie, I just want you to know that I met you many years ago at an event, and it was a networking event, and we had maybe a 10-minute conversation where you talked about value. And you know, you don't portray yourself as a mentor, but so many people have looked up to you over the years. And I love that. I think what I love more about it is that you give just to give, and you don't even realize how much you're helping other people. So, you know, all of that really truly speaks to me. And everybody in this room has been giving just to help other people. So I think that, you know, part of the whole—
People love to help, you know, you just have to ask. A lot of people are afraid to ask. When I started, I'll just take a sec. When I started, there was a woman that was referred to me, and they said she's the first woman that actually worked in commercial. Like, talk about women, real estate, residential. Honestly, it's quite common. It's fine. It's not easy, but you're a woman. You can sell residential real estate. But you go try sell commercial, and I wouldn't even go near it. So
you're working with the big boys there.
I asked her if I should, you know, take my license and do this. And one woman said, no, it's a shark eating business. It's horrible. The other one said, go for it and have business cards in every pocket. And I remembered that. And I tell people, have business cards in every pocket, because I've sold things in elevators, going up and down an elevator, holding a real estate book. They'll say, oh, are you in real estate? I say, yeah, here's my card. Don't you think they called me? So, you know, I asked for help at the very beginning, and I was shy. Honestly, I was very shy, very insecure. And I really didn't think I could succeed. I just tried. And the first year, and it wasn't about money. You have to believe it really wasn't about money. I tripled my teaching salary the very first year. And I said to myself, I can't believe I actually did that. And then I did it the second year and kept going. But I wouldn't have done it unless someone actually said to me, yeah, give it a try. You can do it. So it's that simple sometimes. Somebody just has to encourage you.
Exactly.
Thank you, Ellie. And did you want to add any? I mean, you touched on so many beautiful, like, heartwarming with Ellie and your own experience.
What did I say to you, Jennifer?
You were just very honest, and you were. It was just one of those conversations that has always remained with me. So, you know, even when some people are not intentional about supporting other women, I think that we should always have conversations that are, you know, making ourselves available for those conversations with anybody in the room.
But I also think that women just, and anybody, not just women and men, just be genuinely interested. Yeah. Genuinely interested in helping. Like, you know, there's no motive for it. There's, oh, well, if you pay me this, I'm going to give you this. There's no transaction.
That's human nature, right? Our human nature comes from love, right? Like we come from love. That's who we are in general, and what we shine out, right? Is being able to help another human being, help another soul in any way, right? And it's just reminding people of who they are, or how I like to call it, living your truth, right?
Yeah, just genuinely want to do it, you know, and make people feel included. That's a huge thing. You know, a lot of people talk about salaries and things like that. And yes, the salary is absolutely is essential. Like, you're not going to do something for nothing, but things like just being acknowledged is huge. Like, when you've done something and people say, and they recognize it, that's a huge thing. I think that it builds confidence, and that's what it's all about. and I think that we need to build each other up. Just a small, like Jennifer reaching out to me a couple of weeks ago and telling me about this group. And I was like, that is so amazing that she just, I know Jennifer, we've networked and been at different.
Everybody knows Jennifer.
Everybody knows Jennifer.
Everybody.
Do you know what I mean? And I follow her on Instagram, and I'm so inspired by how she's changed her life and really picked up the pieces and just really shifted herself. And, the fact that she responds, or she'll reach out and she'll send a message, those are things that mean a lot. They may not mean a lot at the time, but they make a difference to people. You never know what people are going through. So
100%. And thank you so much, Michelle. As we're about to wrap up, I'm going to give some last minute words to Camille. I'm going to call you my soul sister from now on. So from me to you, anything last words that you want to share with us?
Yeah, in terms of empowering women, I would say to all of us to demand accountability. We have leaned in as far as we can lean.
And we're going to fall over.
For our allies to lean in. It's time for our allies to step up and to be accountable and to dismantle this structure that is not truly equitable.
You know what, you've left me with a couple things. Like, I've still got revolutionary sitting in my mind's eye. And now all of a sudden, as soon as you said lean in, I'm thinking of putting that song on, Lean On Me, right?
Lean on me. For sure.
I feel like that's where we need to sit right now. But I want to thank everyone. I want to thank Jennifer. I want to thank you all for tuning in, to Pamela, John, Ellie, Michelle, and Camille for this powerful discussion on real issues impacting real women. And thank you to everyone who joined us virtually. I know you'll have so much to take away, as much as I did. Yes. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, ladies.
Wow. What a great conversation. It's so encouraging to hear diverse perspectives on how we can empower each other. As we've heard, it's never too late to turn our challenges into new opportunities and to create our own leadership roles. Remember, when you're at the decision-making table, speak up, use your voice, say what matters to you. Before we close out today's event, I want to share with you my story, or a little bit about my story. I know many have heard pieces here and there, but the reality was 7 years ago, when I decided that I wanted to be involved in organized real estate, like many of you, I got the rejection letter. And that rejection letter just took me to another point where I was like, wait a minute, nobody's ever rejected me for volunteer work. So that is when I decided to contact the person that sent me the letter. And I contacted him on every means, through telephone, through email, through even social media at the time. And so it was a number of ways that I contacted them just to make sure that they understood who they were talking to, and I couldn't understand why I was getting this rejection letter. And maybe if I look back at my younger me, maybe for a moment, maybe I needed to take a step back and understand what was happening or the process, but I didn't. Instead, I decided to act, so I did. And I let that person know. And of course, using my voice and speaking up for who I am and what I believe in did get me a volunteer position, which also then led to that person learning more about me, who then encouraged me to seek a role, an opportunity in running for the board of directors. And when I took that and heard that, I needed to sit with it in myself and make sure that I internally felt that it was the right time for me to give myself to the organization, and I knew that I wanted to do something bigger. And it was funny because when I think back to those days, I remember sitting in my office and just kind of, saying out loud in my mind's eye that, what else can I do? I want to do something bigger for this industry. And of course, what are the odds that was like my calling being sent to me. And so I always say that in life you meet people who are guides that lead you to different paths, and only you internally will know which path is the right for you. And for me, I took my path and I decided to run for a director's seat. And of course, I remember, I will never forget that Realtor Quest, because I think it was the loudest yes when the votes were announced. So that's a little bit about my story. I have a lot more that I can share with you that took place in that process, because it was not an easy journey in the process of becoming a board of director. And individually, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to share with you. In the meantime, I urge you to follow your passion, to follow your intuition, and keep searching for those ways to live your truth and lead no matter what industry you're in. Being a true leader comes with great responsibility, and part of that is being a champion for women by standing up, advocating for them, and supporting and acknowledging their ideas and efforts and them, and remembering that women who help you become who you are. In doing so, you'll motivate more people to take their ideas and transform them into realities. A network of support is truly transformative, and I've experienced that firsthand. And finally, you can motivate more women by sharing your story. By sharing your story, taking the lessons you've made along the way and how you've overcome those obstacles. Let's begin today's conversation going on social media using hashtag REAL, capital REAL WOMEN. So Real Woman. Can't wait to see all of your tags. Look out in your inbox for a bonus Q&A with Pamela Burnham and key takeaways you can share at your brokerage. Thank you to everyone who's tuned in virtually today, and thank you again to all of our speakers.